Hey, what's up everybody? True Boxing here. Thank you for coming back to get hit with the truth. So today we are continuing the rankings for the fantasy boxing interactive tournament that I'm hosting that is going to determine the best heavyweight from the year 2000 to now 2024, as it involves all the champions in that time frame. This video will be on my number 6 seed, the number 6 heavyweight going into the tournament, the former undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, former 3-time heavyweight world champion, Lennox the Lion Lewis. Now before we get into that, if you could smash the like button, leave a comment, or subscribe to the channel, I really do appreciate any and all support that I can get as I continue to build my channel here. So again guys, I do a point system. That's how I come up with all this. And it's dependent on wins, who you beat, how you beat them. The more titles you win, you know, of the 4 governing belts, you know, the more points opportunities you have. Unification belts are worth more, all that stuff. But again, it's like strength of schedule. Who you beat is very important in this tournament in terms of your seeding. Lennox gets number 6 because during this millennium, Lennox only had 7 world title fights. He went 6-1. Now, if we were including his whole resume, he's probably number 1 or seriously threatening Klitschko for that number 1 seed right there. But you know, because he only had 7, he went 6-1 over 2 title reigns. He only gets you know, the 6th seed here, and you know, let's take a look at his resume in the 2000s. Now, Lennox Lewis entered the year as the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. He had defeated Evander Holyfield to unify the WBC, WBA, and IBF titles. He defeated him in a rematch in November of 1999. And entering 2000, he was the undisputed champion. But that quickly ended for him when in April of 2000, he decided to, instead of fighting mandatory challenger John Ruiz for the WBA title, the WBA mandatory challenger, he took on undefeated American Michael Grant, who had been turning heads at that point. And the WBA quickly stripped him of the title, and he would end up destroying Michael Grant in only 2 rounds, leaving no doubt who the man was. That was the famous night. I loved his line where he said, "I'm a Class A fighter, he's a Class B fighter." I love that when he said it, and especially in his English accent, it was even funnier. But Lennox won that fight. Then he, in July of that year, he would take on Francois Botha and would destroy Botha in only 2 rounds as well, prompting him to return in November to take on the dangerous David Tua, who was his mandatory number 1 contender. And in this fight, we saw a different version of Lennox. We didn't see that aggressive Lennox. He was wary of Tua's power, who at the time, Tua was widely compared to Mike Tyson. And Lennox just used his jab and his boxing and just outclassed David Tua to a convincing 12-round unanimous decision as he retained his 2 belts. Then in April of 2001, while he was filming a movie, Ocean's 11, right around that time frame, he would go to South Africa to defend his title against American Hasim the Rock Rahman. He was a heavy favorite going in, and he widely was overlooking Rahman. And he was winning the fight though. 4 rounds in, he's winning the fight. Then in the 5th round, Rahman threw a Hail Mary right hand after backing him up with 3 jabs. He threw a Hail Mary overhand right that absolutely dropped Lennox Lewis. I remember watching this fight. Actually, I was watching it in my room and was on my computer, and my dad was in the kitchen watching the fight, and I didn't see the initial right hand land because Lennox was in control, complete control. I was like, whatever. I had turned to my computer and I just heard my dad go, "Oh," like that real loud. And I turned and looked and saw Lennox laying on the ground on the mat, and that was all she wrote as a huge upset loss. It was the biggest heavyweight title defeat and upset since Buster Douglas upset Tyson. So this one was really significant. But Lewis wasted no time. As Rockman tried to scramble and fight Mike Tyson, Lewis had an automatic rematch clause, forcing Rockman back into the ring 7 months later in November. And Lewis came in just really pumped up and pissed off, and he destroyed Rockman, laying him out in 4 rounds. One punch knocked him out with an overhand right in the 4th round, and regained his unified heavyweight championship of the world. Then in June of 2002, the super fight finally happened after a postponement. Lewis would fight Mike Tyson, a long-awaited showdown between these two. And it was the biggest fight in boxing by far to that point. You know, it was probably, I mean, you could argue it might have been the biggest heavyweight fight, you know, since the fight of the century with Ali and Frazier. You can argue that. I mean, Tyson, though, was over the hill, and Lewis exposed that. After a first round where Tyson looked decent, landed a couple shots, and was aggressive, Lewis took over the fight with his jab in his right hand and just absolutely beat the shit out of Mike Tyson and broke him down. And in the 8th round, laid him out with a right hand as he knocked him out and retained his unified title. After that, Lewis would give up his IBF belt when he was ordered to face mandatory challenger Chris Bird. Bird wasn't a big name. Lewis wasn't interested in that, so he vacated that title and just held the WBC belt. It took him a year after the Tyson fight to get back in the ring. He was scheduled to fight Kirk Johnson of Canada, who was undefeated. And I think Kirk Johnson had a loss at that point. He was scheduled to fight him. And he decided, Kirk Johnson had to pull out of the fight with a rib injury. So on 13 days' notice, he offered to fight to #1 contender and former WBO champion Vitaly Klitschko, thinking that it wasn't going to be, that big of a deal. And Vitaly gave him a run for his money in an absolute epic 6-round fight. These two guys went to war, and Klitschko was winning the fight early in the first 4 rounds. He was winning the fight, but Lewis was having his moments and started landing big shots himself in the 3rd and 4th round. Then in the 5th and 6th, Lewis seemed like he took the momentum of the fight, but Vitaly was still throwing and landing big shots as well. But after the 6th round, Vitaly had a bad cut over his right eye. They looked at the cut, and I said before, when they lifted up the skin, it looked like there was almost bone showing out of his eye. The referee, it was such a deep cut, the doctor instructed the referee to stop the fight. Vitaly was yelling, "No, no." And Lennox Lewis would win the fight by TKO in the 6th round because the cut was opened by a punch. And Lennox would retain his title by 6-round TKO. After that, Lennox toiled with having a rematch with Vitaly. Everybody wanted the rematch. Lennox seemed to be into it, but he wanted time to think. So Vitaly went forward and defeated Kirk Johnson, the guy who was originally supposed to fight Lennox. He destroyed him in 2 rounds. And they were supposed to collide in April of 2004, but Lennox decided, before finalizing a rematch, he decided to retire from the sport of boxing as the reigning WBC heavyweight champion and lineal champion. And that was all she wrote. Lennox would not return to the ring. He retired and would not return to the ring after that, and stayed retired. So Lennox's his biggest victory, I mean, quite arguably comes down to one of those 3 performances: Vitaly, Mike Tyson, or the rematch with Hasim Rahman. I think the win over Tyson was a legacy type win. The win over Klitschko, unsettled, even though I think Lennox had stolen the thunder back, and I think he would have won the fight if that fight would have kept going. We still don't know. And because it ended on a punch that, on a cut that was caused by a punch, it's just too much to question. I think the biggest win could very well have been the rematch with Rockman, because it showed his dominance and how good he could be when he wanted to be. But the win over Tyson, I have to give it to that one, just because it was such a legacy victory for him in a moment. Tyson was still a huge name, and that fight had so much build to it. That was absolutely the biggest win. But he had 6 victories over 2 title reigns. He retired as champion in the second one, and in the first loss, he avenged. Lennox is one of the very rare fighters that beat every man he ever got in the ring with, including his 90s run as heavyweight champ. He avenged his other defeat to Oliver McCall, and he avenged his controversial draw to Evander Holyfield, beating him in their rematch. Lewis began the millennium as the undisputed champion, and we did not see another one until Alexander Usyk, just a few weeks ago, accomplished that feat by defeating Tyson Fury. So because Lennox Lewis left such a masterful legacy and greatness, there was a big gap in boxing after his retirement. You know, the Klitschko brothers were talented, they were good, but a lot of people couldn't get on board, and it took a long time for us to believe in the heavyweight championship of the world the way we did when Lennox Lewis held it. And maybe we still haven't, but the history that Lennox provided, you know, and the dominance that he provided, and his mastery, his natural ability and athleticism was just on another level. He was great. Lennox Lewis was truly a great heavyweight champion, and I was so glad that I grew up in the time of Lennox. And I'm very interested in seeing how Lennox fares in this tournament, because I would wager he's one of the favorites. 6'5", the top 6 guys are giants, and actually 7 of the top 8 are giants in the top 8 fighters. So Lennox Lewis, I'm very excited to see what he does, compared to some of the other guys in this tournament. Really looking forward to it. And that is my number 6 heavyweight for my interactive fantasy heavyweight tournament that I am hosting. I hope you enjoyed this video. Lennox the Lion Lewis, the former undisputed heavyweight champ, former 3-time heavyweight champion of the world. This is True Boxing. You've been hit with the truth.